Take a good look at what's coming down this highway. That bizarre thing right there. It's a Russian tank, a multi-million-dollar T-72, covered with what looks like a giant chicken coop cage. The Russians call it Tsar Mangal, the Tsar's grill. I prefer to call it a makeshift fix, I know. It sounds like a joke, but it's not. They're actually using this. Look. That this bizarre tank is advancing into Ukrainian territory. These improvised structures are Russia's desperate attempt to protect their tanks from drones falling from the sky. But there's a problem. These solutions that were supposed to save the tanks have become the worst nightmare for the Russians. The reason is so absurd you won't believe it. First, you need to understand the problem that Russia is facing. Imagine the scene. You're a Russian soldier inside a 40-ton tank. Your tank's front armor is over 200 millimeters thick. You're protected against almost everything from the front. But there's a weak spot. The top of the tank, especially around the turret, has only 10 to 30 millimeters of armor. The reason? No one expected attacks coming from the skies so often, but then came the war in Ukraine, and with it, a threat that no one was prepared to face. Drones? I'm not referring to costly military drones, but to simple, often modified drones from commercial models, equipped with explosives and piloted in first person. The Ukrainians are using these first-person view drones to attack Russian tanks from above. Do you know how much one of these drones costs? Around $500 to destroy a tank worth millions. It's a 360-degree threat. The drones can come from any direction, from any angle, and exploit exactly the weakest point of the tank. For Russia, this turned into a nightmare, so the Russians needed to do something, and fast. The solution they found was, well, improvised. They started building structures using whatever they had on hand. Wire, metal mesh, wood, even steel cables. The idea was simple: to create a barrier on top of the tank that would make drones or explosives detonate before reaching the actual armor. These structures became known as Tsar Mangaos. The name comes from their appearance, which resembles a giant barbecue grill. Some call them cope cages. In the beginning, they were relatively simple structures, just a metal grid over the turret. But the problem kept getting worse. First-person view drones didn't stop showing up. On the contrary, the Ukrainians started using more and more drones, and the Russians reacted by building bigger and heavier structures, until we reached what you saw at the start: the turtle tanks. The turtle tanks. These are tanks completely covered by a metal shell. It looks like a steel box on tracks. And that's not an exaggeration. These tanks were turned into mobile bunkers. The idea was simple: absorb all the drones that came, and still keep moving forward. But here's the problem. Remember when I said these solutions became the worst nightmare? That's right. These improvised structures are literally killing Russian tanks. And I'm not speaking metaphorically. The tanks are dying without Ukraine having to shoot at them. I'll explain how this happens. Look, a tank is a complex machine. It has an engine that generates power. That power is transferred through the transmission to the tracks. The transmission is the mechanical heart of the tank. If the transmission fails, the tank doesn't move. It's that simple. Now, consider this. These tanks were designed to carry a certain weight. The weight of the armor, the weight of the turret, the weight of the ammunition, Everything was calculated. But when you start putting tons of unplanned metal on top of the tank, what happens? The transmission can't handle it. A Russian soldier gave an interview to a military historian. He didn't want to give his name, but what he revealed is devastating. He said, "The chassis survives, but the transmission and the side gearboxes do not." He said that, in another company, a tank with a Tsar Mangal made of cables couldn't even go 10 kilometers before one of the gearboxes failed. And there's more. He said that when you mount the Tsar Mangal on the turret instead of the hull, the turret drives burn out. Then, you can forget about manual rotation. The turret gets stuck. Do you understand what that means? The Russians are putting these structures on to protect the tanks from drones. But the weight of these structures is destroying the tanks themselves. The transmission burns out, the tank stops, and when a tank stops in the middle of the battlefield, it's dead. The crew needs to abandon the tank. Then they become just as vulnerable to the drones they tried to avoid, if not more so. Ukraine doesn't even need to destroy the tank. It's already disabled. No one is going to try to fix a burned-out transmission with drones flying overhead. But wait. After all, why are Russian soldiers making these improvised fixes? Why aren't they using the professional armor they're supposed to have? This is where things get even more serious. Russia simply isn't providing adequate armor for its troops. Modern Russian tanks should be equipped with something called explosive reactive armor, or ERA. The most advanced version is called Relict. Here's how ERA works. They are explosive boxes attached to the tank's exterior. When a projectile hits the box, it explodes in a controlled way and neutralizes the impact before it reaches the actual armor of the tank. It's a smart technology, and when it works properly, it works well. But here's the problem. Russia doesn't have enough of this technology. The same Russian soldier who talked about the transmissions explained this. He said that in the older tanks, you could still find some blocks of ERA, but there were already missing parts. And what about the more modern tanks, the so-called BVMs? He was straightforward. All that relic they show apparently only exists in Kremlin cartoons. That means the tanks, which should be equipped with the best Russian armor, are not. Instead, the soldiers are improvising. They're building fake ERA blocks in field workshops, literally in makeshift garages on the battlefield. And do you know how they do that? By taking explosives from mine-clearing charges, the UR-77. They then put those explosives inside metal boxes they make themselves. Then they strap those boxes to the tank and hope it works. The soldiers said this improvised contraption works 50% of the time at a 45-degree angle. 50% half the time. And that's when the angle is perfect. Compare that to a real ERA, which has an effectiveness of over 90%. That's a huge difference. But there's an even bigger problem than that. When the ERA isn't installed properly, or when it's improvised, it can create a catastrophic effect. Russian T-series tanks have an auto-loading system. This system stores the ammunition in a carousel at the base of the turret. The advantage is that the tank only needs 3 crew members instead of 4. There is a disadvantage. If a shell penetrates the tank and hits that ammunition, everything explodes at once. There can be up to 40 shells in there. It's like leaving 40 lit fireworks inside the tank. The pressure from the explosion has nowhere to go, so it takes the easiest way out, which is upward. The turret is literally ripped off the tank and thrown into the air. The military calls this the jack-in-the-box effect, and when the ERA is poorly installed, it can detonate prematurely and cause exactly this effect. But the situation is even worse than it appears. At the beginning of the war, in February 2022, Russia had about 3,330 operational tanks. By September of the same year, just 7 months later, it had already lost almost 1,000 tanks. That's 30% of the operational fleet. So, Russia started pulling tanks from its reserves. The Soviet Union left behind a gigantic legacy of military equipment. There were more than 7,300 tanks stored in depots across Russia. These tanks sat idle for decades, many of them rusting outdoors. But they were tanks, and Russia needed them. I'll show you something surprising. Open-source intelligence analysts started using satellite images to count how many tanks were still in those depots, and the numbers they found are frightening. In October 2025, a specialist named John P99 conducted a thorough analysis using satellite images. He found that out of the 7,300 tanks that were in reserve, only about 2,887 remain. This means that more than 4,400 tanks have been taken out of storage since the beginning of the war. Of those 2,887 tanks that are left, only 23% are in usable condition. 23%. That's about 721 tanks, 721 usable tanks. That's what's left of the Soviet legacy. There's more. Internal documents from Uralvagonzavod have leaked. We're talking about Russia's largest tank manufacturer. And these documents show Russia's long-term plan. They won't fix the old fleet. They're going to build a new one. The plan is to produce 1,118 new tanks between 2027 and 2029. But that will only start in 2027. This clearly shows that Russia is admitting that the Soviet fleet is dead, and now it needs to build everything from scratch, and that will take years. You might be thinking, but what about advanced technology? Doesn't Russia have modern defense systems? Look, they do. They have something called Arena-M. It's an active protection system. The idea is simple. A radar detects projectiles approaching the tank and automatically fires a countermeasure to destroy the projectile before it hits the tank. It's the Russian equivalent of the Israeli trophy system. And it works. It works very well against missiles. The Arena-M was designed to intercept high-speed anti-tank missiles, including the Javelin, which costs more than $100,000 each. And it does this successfully. But here's the problem. The Arena-M is completely blind to the real threat, the drones. The reason? The radar was designed to detect large, metallic, fast objects, missiles. But drones are small, made of plastic and fiber, and they fly slowly. The Arena-M's radar uses Doppler detection, which works by measuring the speed of objects. Fast objects are easy to detect. If the object is slow, the radar confuses it with birds, leaves, or anything else in the environment. A Russian military expert named Viktor Murakovsky explained this in detail. He said that the system simply can't distinguish a small, slow drone from the background noise of the terrain. So, Russia spent decades and millions of rubles developing a sophisticated system to stop a $100,000 missile. And that system is completely useless against a $500 drone. But there's something very ironic about this story that I need to show you. Recently, the Karbyshev Military Engineering Academy in Russia registered a patent for a new drone protection system. It's a system of foldable screens that can be installed on tanks. The design is lightweight, modular, and adaptable. Do you know where this idea started? Ukraine. The Ukrainians developed a similar system called heads-up display. And this system really works. It works so well that Russia simply copied it. And the funniest thing is, in the Russian patent itself, they claim that the new system is 1.2 to 1.5 times more effective than the Russian alternatives. They're literally admitting that the Ukrainian solution they copied is better than anything they had before. As you can see, Russia started the war with thousands of tanks. Ukrainian drones started destroying them, and Russia didn't provide professional armor to protect the tanks. The soldiers improvised with heavy structures. These structures are burning out the tanks' transmissions. The tanks are dying without Ukraine even needing to shoot at them. The Soviet reserve fleet is almost depleted. Only 721 usable tanks remain. Russia plans to build a new fleet, but that will only start in 2 years. Russia's most advanced defense system, the Arena M, doesn't work against drones. And now, Russia is copying Ukrainian solutions and admitting that they are better. This is the collapse of a military doctrine happening before our eyes. Russia entered Ukraine believing that its tanks would be the decisive force. But the tanks did not evolve quickly enough to deal with the reality of the modern battlefield. And, worst of all, the very solutions that were supposed to save the tanks have become what is destroying them. It's a paradox, an armored paradox. The tanks are being killed by the armor that was supposed to protect them. And you, what did you find most impressive about this story? Share your thoughts below. If you like this content, share it with anyone else who enjoys this kind of military analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.